something's changed inside Aston Martin. It's not just the car. It's the people, the structure, the way they think. While the rest of the grid is preparing for a fight, Aston Martin is preparing for a takeover. Multiple teams are now tracking Aston Martin's internal ops. And what they're seeing has never been done at this scale. Because in 2026, this won't be the same green team from 3 years ago. They've built something smarter, faster, and far, far more dangerous. And if this structure holds, then what's coming could make 2026 the most one-sided season in years. Let's get one thing straight. Aston Martin is no longer a midfield team. Not in ambition, not in infrastructure, and definitely not in personnel. Because behind the walls of their Silverstone base, they've assembled one of the most lethal technical teams in modern Formula One. And they've done it quietly. It started with Dan Fallows, not just former Red Bull, but one of the key minds behind the early concept work that eventually evolved into the RB18. He didn't just copy Red Bull's aero philosophy, he helped build it. Now, he's leading Aston Martin's aerodynamic department. But make no mistake, he's doing far more than just airflow. Next came Eric Blandon. He left Mercedes after nearly a decade of managing complex airflow simulations, energy loss modeling, and hybrid-era packaging. He's one of the few engineers who truly understands how airflow and electronics interact, not just in theory, but in the chaos of real-world race conditions. Then there's Luca Furbato, a veteran strategist and technical coordinator. He's been through McLaren, Sauber, Toro Rosso, and Alfa Romeo. But what he's doing at Aston Martin is different. He's not just managing departments. He's turning them into a single organism, where aero, chassis, and powertrain don't just work together. They evolve together. Surrounding that trio? Tom McCullough, head of performance, with a deep understanding of live data feedback and how to adapt a setup on the fly. Andrew Alessi, straight from Red Bull's operations division, bringing process efficiency and simulation accuracy. And Pedro de la Rosa, no longer just a test driver. He's become the full-time bridge between the simulator and the actual car. This is a lineup that spans Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and more. It's not just experience. It's distributed intelligence. Every weak spot in the 2023 to 2024 car, they've covered it with people who've solved that exact problem somewhere else. And unlike other teams, there's no ego here. No one's trying to protect a legacy concept. No one's saying, this is how we've always done it. They're building a team for 2026, from scratch, with no sacred cows. And now that Newey is part of it? Now that he's shaping the long-term structure? You don't just have great engineers. You have a unified machine. One that's not just ready to fight for wins, but to dismantle the entire pecking order of Formula One. What's making people nervous is that Aston Martin hasn't just hired the right people. They've given them room to think differently. And the results are already showing. Because inside the garage, Aston Martin no longer behaves like a team trying to catch up. They behave like a team that knows something the others don't. They've shortened their decision loops. They no longer wait for third-party suppliers. They design, simulate, manufacture, and validate, all under one roof, with zero reliance on external partners to tell them what's possible. It's a different kind of confidence. And it's coming from the top down. Fallows isn't just managing airflow. He's directing car concept development based on what could exist under the 2026 regulations, not what's currently being done by others. Furbato is streamlining internal protocols so that simulation teams don't lose time waiting for track data or tire feedback. And Blandon? He's building flow logic around predicted corner behavior, not just reactionary setups. This structure allows Aston Martin to work in parallel, not sequentially like most other teams. While others are still finalizing aero maps, Aston is already feeding thermal models into their power unit simulations. While teams debate whether to test wing variants in the tunnel or on track, Aston does both simultaneously. And that's the moment the panic starts to set in for rival teams. Because none of this should be possible at their scale. Not unless something truly radical is happening behind the scenes. The question everyone's now asking is simple. If this is how the team operates in January, what happens when they get to race day? It's one thing to have a strong technical team. It's another to have a strong design philosophy. But when those two are aligned, and placed inside a regulatory environment full of ambiguity, that's when real disruption happens. And that's exactly what Aston Martin has engineered. See, the 2026 rules, as strict as they seem, are filled with blind spots. Especially when it comes to active aerodynamics, energy deployment control, and predictive behavior under cornering load. The regulations define what must be fixed, what must be declared, What cannot change under certain inputs. But they don't define how decisions are made. That's where Aston Martin's internal architecture becomes so dangerous. Because if you're building a logic system, one that interprets driver input, track evolution, grip, and wind variability, and then decides how the car behaves before the driver even commits, you're still technically legal. So long as you're using the FIA's standard control hardware, and the 2 approved aerodynamic modes, you can feed it whatever intelligence you want, as long as it doesn't violate the letter of the law. And that's the twist. The FIA may be monitoring outputs. They may be checking for declared parameters, switching points, deployment maps, but what they're not monitoring, what they can't monitor, is what happens upstream, inside the logic, inside the systems Aston Martin is now building. And according to one source close to the process, those systems aren't reactive. They're predictive. That's not a car anymore. That's a machine that learns, that thinks. And if the rulebook doesn't catch up fast enough, it won't matter what the other teams bring to Bahrain. They'll already be behind. Most people still think the fight in 2026 will come down to horsepower and downforce. But that's not where the real gap will be. It's time. Aston Martin isn't just designing a faster car. They're designing a faster process. While other teams are locked into traditional feedback cycles, where data moves from track to sim, from sim to CFD, and then finally into the tunnel, Aston Martin has cut that loop in half. In some cases, by more than half. They don't wait 3 days to know if a component is working. They don't need 2 race weekends to confirm a new aero map. Because their internal systems are built to validate concepts in real time. Across simulation, physical testing, and predictive overlays. That's not just efficient. That's oppressive. And the ripple effect is enormous. While Red Bull might be refining 2 rear-wing variants, Aston can test 5. While Mercedes is evaluating battery cooling profiles for hot weather circuits, Aston is already modeling deployment stress based on real track evolution in Qatar or Miami, before the race weekend even starts. Even setup work is different. Teams like Ferrari may need Friday practice to stabilize ride height and balance. Aston Martin's system, if it's working correctly, can lock in predictive behavior, using inputs from the sim days before the car touches the track. And when it comes to race execution, that time advantage becomes something else entirely. They can recover from mistakes faster, switch strategies on the fly, update models mid-session, react to wind, grip, tire wear, and still stay ahead of schedule. That's the part the public won't see. It won't show up in a sector time or a highlight reel. But inside the garages, inside the telemetry feeds, that's where the real damage will be done. Because this isn't just about building the best car. It's about running the fastest operation. And right now, nobody's running faster than Aston Martin. Ferrari was the first to react. Not with a public statement, but with an internal shakeup. Sources close to Maranello have confirmed that at least 2 simulation leads have been pulled off 2025 projects and reassigned to future logic-based development. In plain terms, they're trying to reverse engineer what Aston Martin is doing before it becomes uncatchable. They're not trying to copy the AMR26. They're trying to understand its structure. Because even if the Ferrari chassis is competitive on raw pace, that won't matter if they're 4 weeks behind in development logic. The days of catching up at the factory are over. Mercedes, meanwhile, is frozen. Their W17 engine concept was once rumored to be the most advanced on the grid. Now, it might be irrelevant. Because their aero department isn't yet in sync with their hybrid deployment tools. Their timeline doesn't match. Their tunnel data is fighting with their sim results. And the one thing they don't have, a unified concept, is the one thing Aston Martin has. The most telling response has come from Red Bull. Quietly, they've begun reviewing their internal workflow structure. Not because their car philosophy is wrong, but because their process isn't lean enough. Red Bull has brilliance, but brilliance layered with hierarchy, legacy systems, and internal friction. Aston Martin doesn't have that. Not anymore. They're leaner. They're faster. And more dangerously, they're learning quicker than anyone expected. So now the top teams are looking inward, trying to fix problems they didn't even realize were problems until Aston exposed them. And it might already be too late, because by the time they catch up to what Aston Martin's doing now, Aston may already be 2 steps ahead of that. Right now, there's no protest, no technical challenge, no formal investigation into what Aston Martin is doing. But make no mistake, the other teams are already preparing for one. Not because Aston's broken a rule, but because they found a way to redefine the rules that already exist. And that's what makes this so dangerous. Because if the AMR26 shows up in Bahrain, and it works, If it starts outperforming cars that had years of dominance behind them, this won't be seen as a clever innovation. It'll be treated as a threat. The FIA will come under pressure. Clarification documents will start circulating. There will be urgent meetings. Not in public, but in private. Behind closed doors, where teams fight over interpretation. Not engineering. But Aston Martin won't care. Because this isn't about just 2026. This is about building a system that can scale, evolve, and dominate across multiple seasons. And that might be the most unsettling part of all. They're not chasing a title. They're chasing a framework. A method. A way to run a Formula One team faster than anyone else. So the question now isn't, can they win races? It's, what happens when the fastest learning team becomes the fastest on track? And if that happens, if Aston Martin proves in March what some believe they already know, then 2026 won't just be a new era of regulation. It will be a new era of Formula One. And everyone else will be playing catch up.